Good morning. We are here from TPM Long Beach with great Eric Johnson. Uh, good morning.
Good morning, Jose.
It's been absolutely great. I mean, last weekend we were in TPMTech. Um, what do you think that Eric?
It was great. Honestly, surpassed my own expectations. I think my team's expectations. That we had a great turnout, and everyone was obviously very excited to be back in person again. But also, I think it was great to kind of get back into the discussions about how technology can kind of advance our industry. So it was, definitely, I think, a welcome kind of 2 days for the industry, and looking forward to thinking about what next year's looks like already. So
Wow.
yeah.
So, what are the major takeaways from the conference?
So yeah, good question. I've had kind of a couple days to think about that. I think adoption and incentives to drive adoption of software continues to be a challenge. I don't think the industry is lacking sort of both innovation and the number of people innovating. That's not the problem. The software to enable people to build platforms is not the problem. It's more driving kind of usage and adoption, getting over kind of the hurdles that we traditionally have where we rely upon ourselves to make calculations and decisions that are kind of getting a little bit beyond human scale, right? Not to say that humans aren't super involved in this industry, and they always will be, but sort of turning over some of those sort of non-value add processes that technology can address. So yeah, that for me was the big takeaway.
I agree that adoption is probably something that is critical. Why are we struggling these particular times with adoption? What's the problem? What seems to be the problem?
Yeah, I think so. My feeling is there's lots of interest and lots of exploration about all the tools that are available. I mean, I come across a new technology company pretty much every week, if not more often than that. So I think that there's a lot more kind of open eyes and exploration about what's going on, but it's hard, right? I mean, most companies don't work really quickly in terms of adopting new technology. It can be, especially a larger corporation, it can be a years-long process to change something out. And a lot of times they've invested in something that works fairly well, and they're not ready to rip that out and start all over again. So I think technology that is more focused on making existing systems or existing processes better without completely changing them, I think that's where we'll start to see a little bit more adoption, and then maybe those can kind of, there's a term in software, land and expand, right? It's been around forever. I think that's the approach that works for this industry, because it's hard to change the engine on the airplane while it's flying, right? That's the old cliche, but it's so true, right? Everybody has been fighting fires the last 2 years. So.
And I'm going to share something that happened to me, which is funny. I was by the expo, right? I asked some questions. They give me the answers. They saw me, but they weren't able to close. And I was technically ready because, I mean, it's something that I'm going to be shopping around, that I need, and I couldn't explain why they weren't able to close me.
It's interesting. Going into the pandemic, or sort of in that first year of the pandemic, there's definitely somewhat of a challenge, and this is something we're seeing across all industries, the labor challenge, right? Okay. Where everything from companies having trouble staffing warehouses to finding data entry people to even higher level jobs, right? The same things with software companies, right? The inbound interest is sometimes surpassing their ability to deploy and implement, right? And I definitely heard of customers who had signed a contract and the company couldn't implement them fast enough, and they sort of abandoned the project, right? So that's going to be a constraint. I think it's an implementation constraint. There's definitely a talent constraint on the engineering side, right? So I mean, everybody's looking for amazing engineers, not just decent ones, but like amazing software engineers.
Is that the reason why P44 or E2 Open, right? They are probably a different level than the others, maybe?
That's a good question. Well, you could say that both of those companies, to differing degrees, because E2 Open's been around for 20 years, Project 44, a fraction of that, but they're large, and their demands for kind of talent are the same as everybody else in the industry. Capital is obviously a factor in this.
Yeah.
Project 44 has raised, I forget the total amount, but it's in the hundreds of millions. eDopen went public, so they have access to public capital
Right.
to win that talent. And yeah, I mean, the numbers I'm hearing in terms of what it takes to lure talent to these companies is kind of mind-boggling if you think about 2 years ago. But like, you know, we were just in there hearing Gary Cohn give a keynote, and he talked about, you know, the very basic jobs in America are, you know, they can't be filled at double the rates that they were hourly, you know, just a couple of years ago, right? So that's just stretching across the entire economy right now.
Yeah. It's something that I heard last week. I mean, it's about the IoT that is being used for the track and trace and stuff like that, and the real time. And I heard that basically they rely more on digital picture, video, and stuff like that, other than sensors and stuff like that. Is that the case?
Oh, interesting. Well, so there's a lot of different approaches. I haven't really heard of that approach, but I'm not shocked when I come across things that I haven't heard of, because there's so much innovation going on. I think everyone is trying to address that ability to track products at an affordable cost for the shipper or forwarder that can kind of compensate for the fact that EDI, kind of traditional EDI based milestone messaging, is not complete enough right now for the end user. So every single day I hear about kind of sensor technology getting cheaper, smaller, potentially disposable, need to about some devices. So it does feel like in maybe two to 3 years, we're going to be looking at a landscape where devices or stickers that are trackable are just a lot more. I don't know.
RFID?
Well, replacing RFID, essentially, like a new generation of what RFID was intended to be.
Right.
So we may find, I'm a little hesitant to say like every single container, every single shipment will have that, but we may see it move from only high value, only high risk goods to something that's, you know, for a bigger selection of goods that can be trackable that way.
Now the other thing that I see that is very questionable is that we rely on information. I mean, if we are talking about, containers, right? So if we rely on the information that is provided by the steamship lines and the terminals, how about, let's say, for example, China? I mean, how we are going to be able to access that information in those places to be able to be accurate, more accurate?
Well, access to information across regions has certainly, you know, been a historical burden, and we're sitting in a very unstable geopolitical environment right now, and the ability to kind of cut off data at origin points is certainly a concern. There was some issues around AIS, and it wasn't universal. Different AIS providers obviously had different capabilities in China than the ones that were sort of getting restricted. But the ability to sort of not rely on the provider, but actually have, you know, information about where the asset is or where the shipment is itself, and have that not be reliant on a third-party provider, even the provider that you're paying to move the freight, I think is the ultimate goal. It's just, is it affordable, right? I mean, freight costs have gone up, input costs have gone up, everything costs more, right? So do you want to make the additional cost of tracking it with the device? That's been the burden, or the hurdle, I think, for shippers. So
what we're going to see next year.
That's right.
What we're going to see next year.
Oh, what are we going to see? So I think, you know, we barely scratched the surface in terms of topic areas. There's certainly more that we could talk about from a port technology perspective, where not necessarily operationally at the ports, but how the ports interface with supply chains. There's a lot of discussion at TPM that's going to happen about that, kind of laying the groundwork of where this goes over the next year. So I think next spring we'll be looking at a really interesting environment with ports playing a bigger role as kind of nodes, especially in the US. In Europe, that's already happened. In Singapore, that's already happened. So that's one area that's super interesting. You know, for me, I want this to be a global event, right? So it can't just be a North American event. We're talking about global supply chains. So more, hopefully, as fingers crossed, as restrictions go down on travel, we'll be able to incorporate more Asian and European kind of perspectives on this, and highlight some of the vendors that are doing some pretty interesting stuff there too. So
Definitely, we're going to be looking forward to it, especially for the TPMTech. I mean, that is going to be in Singapore or something like that.
yeah,
That
who
would
knows?
be the idea,
Who
right?
knows? That would be amazing. I mean, LATAM too. I didn't even touch on LATAM. There's so much going on right now,
That is
technology-wise, in LATAM. So, and that's obviously a critical market in North America. So, we could probably have a 2-day conference just on technology in the Americas, actually. So,
Absolutely.
there's a lot of opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for taking the time, I mean, to spend and share with us, I mean, the major highlights. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Not next week, next year, I'm sorry.
Yeah, next week might be a little too soon for us to plan another event. But yeah, looking forward to seeing you next year.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Jose.